You're listening to the Business Mike podcast. Amazing interviews with entrepreneurs and industry thought leaders.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business Mike podcast. Joining me today is James. James, why don't you share with the listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dowdy. I'm really grateful and glad to be here. Again, my name's James. I'm the founder and CEO of Share More Stories. And Share More Stories is a human experience research company. Our primary offering is the Seek platform. We spell that SEEQ because Seek stands for Stories to Engage, Explore, and Question. And so the Seek platform is really focused on developing consumer insights around customer experience, customer engagement. We also do employee experience insights through that platform as well. So that's what we're focused on, and we're doing some interesting things in the way we use storytelling and AI to get at those insights.
Fantastic. Now, I just wanted to find out from you because there are so many softwares that do something similar to what you guys are doing. So it's a two-part question. The first is, what inspired you to create Seek? There must have been a gap there in the market, a need that you saw that you felt you could satisfy in a unique way. And The second part of that question is, what exactly does Seek do that is unique to other platforms in a similar space? So what was the inspiration and how is it different?
Yeah. So a lot of platforms, or I should say a lot of tools, deal with one aspect of either the participant's journey as a research participant, customer or employee, or the customer's journey. They deal with one aspect of that or another, which is great. You know, it's good to have that kind of focus. But when we were talking to CX leaders, marketing brand leaders, and sometimes organizational leaders, we were hearing what we used to hear when we were in their shoes, which is, I have lots of data, but the data are not very well connected. I have lots of insights, I have some insights, but the insights are definitely not connected. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how what I've learned over here about the customer matches up with what I've learned over here. So that was one thing we heard early on. They were craving more actionable, action-ready insights, and they were craving a more streamlined way to get from the data to the insight to something they could act on. So that was kind of the macro picture. More specifically, what we started to realize is in this space, in both consumer insights and consumer experience research in general, some of the tools do a great job of saying, here's a platform, you find the customer, you get the information, and we'll run surveys, we'll do NPS, we'll do some basic engagement metrics and give that back to you. But they were really missing the big part of why the experience is what it is. And this is what our customers told us. They would say things like, I'm using this engagement survey tool, or I'm tracking CX touchpoints here, but none of that's telling me why the experience is what it is. And when I run into a problem, I can't really diagnose it. I know what, where, when, and who, but I don't know why. And so Seek really starts to fill a need in that toolkit to say, when you really want to understand why the experience is what it is, you turn to a tool like Seek. And so what we found is there was a space in the market to provide deeper insights about people's experiences. That's the why part. And to deliver them to the customer in more of an integrated journey where all in one place, I can bring my customers into this platform to share their stories about their experiences. I can analyze those stories in this platform, and I can generate actionable data and insights in the platform. That's an end-to-end solution that exists maybe at a high level, but not at a level of depth, or it exists in depth, but not across that entire journey. So that's really what we're trying to hit there, is that sweet spot.
Fantastic. And for me, the unique selling point is the why. And I'm sure there's somebody watching or listening to this that's curious. They're wondering, how would that manifest itself? Can you share with us an example of how Seek, for instance, would extract the why in a customer journey?
So when you think about these types of questions, it's helpful to think about two people having a conversation or having an interaction, right? I might, if you ask me a question, I might give you a very surface answer. Or if you're observing my behavior, you might understand what I'm doing, and you might see it, but you might not know why I'm doing it. And you may think that's fine, I don't need to know why. But what if my reasons for doing it change? Don't you want to know that? Because if my reasons for doing it change, you've got to now anticipate, well, maybe my behavior is going to change. And you could see this, 2 customers, exact same demographics, exact same behaviors in the marketplace. But one's reason for using your product is very different from the other. So guess what? If there's something that happens in their life or something changes in your product where your product's no longer meeting their reasons and you're saying, but they look the same and they do the same, why aren't they staying loyal? Or why won't they adopt this new product the same rate this one will? Because you don't understand their why. And so the why helps us better understand the behaviors that they are exhibiting so we can better anticipate what could change if their context changes. And also if things are not working as well as we thought they should with that customer, we have a reason why. Because again, sometimes people are just answering your questions. They're not really telling you what you need to know. And that's human behavior. So when we go to the story, when we actually ask our participants, don't just answer a few questions in a survey, write a story about your experience with this product or this brand. Tell us how it made you feel. Tell us why it made you feel that way. You're literally getting the why behind their experience. They're telling you not just who they are, but how they're interacting with your brand and product and how it's fitting into their lives and what it means to them. When you have that kind of insight, it's really, really rich. But the problem becomes, how do I analyze that at scale? How do I structure that kind of unstructured qualitative data? So what we do in the Seek platform is we turn stories into actionable data by first, we quantify the emotions in each of those stories. So we are running 55 different emotional predictions, values, needs, aspects of different personality traits to create an emotional map of not only that individual, but an aggregated customer base or community. And then we're showing you how those emotions relate to specific types of experiences that they're having, which are gleaned and categorized by their stories. And so you're getting a really, really rich, almost like ethnographic type view, but at a much greater scale. You know, I can't go do ethnography with 500 people very easily, but I can get 500 stories about my product and brand from customers. And I can learn very deeply how they're interacting with the product, how they're using it, and why they're using it. I've got other tools that tell me who, what, when, and where, like I said, but it's hard to answer the why and some of the how. That's where this tool shows up. And so the final outputs are, of course, things like reports that analyze those customer experiences and show them more emotionally versus just behaviorally. But the other thing that it results in is what we call engagement frameworks. Because going back to what we heard in the beginning, our customers are looking for really actionable insight. So the way we can act on that is to say, now that you better understand their experience, here's how you can better engage this customer. Here are the specific points in their journey defined by them, not us sitting back and sketching it up in a mirror. They're telling us, this is my engagement journey with you. This is what's great. This is what's not great. And now we can actually take action on that.
Right. And how do you normally get these stories from the customers of your customers? Do they type them out? Do they use voice, video? What are some of the methods to elicit this information?
It's a great question. So today we're doing pretty much all of our stories are written submissions. They actually write them in the platform. So of course a user might log in, see what the prompt is, and then log out and write on their phone, Notes app, copy it back in and submit. The way our platform works, it's a web scale, web-based app. So it saves your progress as you go. You could start, you could leave. It even allows you to like pick and choose the kind of senses you remember having about that memory or that experience. So it paints a really rich picture. So you're doing that while you're recalling your story. Most people don't really have a story in mind until you prompt them. They have lots of stories, but they're not top of mind. So you prompt them, they react to the prompt, they write their story in real time in the web-based app, and then they're done. They can use the voice application on their phone and just literally transcribe that into the story capture function. And in our roadmap, we're working on fully embedded voice and video capture. But what we find today is the written experience is still a little unique, because it allows the person to reflect while they're writing and not worry about what they sound like or look like. So they very easily and sort of intuitively go back and change this and update that to get the story where they want. But we also tell them, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a perfect writer. And our technology knows how to get rid of the ums and the I thoughts and wait a minute and, it knows how to get rid of that kind of stuff. So whether they voice it in or type it in, it's pretty easy to get their story. And they'll come to the platform in one of two main ways. Each of our projects is dedicated to that customer. So we have a project running on, say, travel experiences for a particular brand. That project is pushed out either publicly to people who might screen and qualify for that project, or we're recruiting against a known profile. And then the third way is the customer themselves, oftentimes when they're doing real EX and CX work, they will say, let's run a sample of our customer database and let's study their experiences. And so in those cases, either they're pushing out the project to their customers and their existing, sort of CRM channels, or they're giving us a subset of the mailing list and we're recruiting them into the project via email or text.
Right. And what's the biggest sample size of data that has been used with your software? In other words, what's the most number of customers a client of yours has had running with this software?
Yeah, we've got the capacity to run limitless, and we quote prices at 1,000 and 300 and as small as 100. Biggest ones we've done have been about 550, so call it 600 participants, which really makes it a very unique, compelling proposition in terms of where qualitative versus quantitative research sits. It's really hard to do, like I said, qualitative research with a lot of people because it's logistical, it's expensive, it's time consuming. But of course, you can't get a ton of depth in most quantitative surveys. So this is another example of like finding a sweet spot between qual and quant by saying we want to get richness and depth in this particular methodology that you can't really get if we're just doing, quick surveys, NPS scores, feedback mechanisms. But we also have the scalability of it being a web-based app with AI-driven analytics that we can't easily do if we're just running a bunch of focus groups or in-depth interviews. So every research tool has its place, but we really think this one, especially when you compare it to qualitative tools that go deep into the customer experience, this is a dramatic change from what those tools have to offer, dramatic improvement.
Yeah. I'm just curious as to whether the same tool, because organizations have internal and external customers, can the same tool be applied for internal customers and extract some of that information for the sake of the organization's efficiency?
Absolutely. And we do a lot of work with our customers in both the employee experience and the customer experience. And the more we do, the more we're proving kind of in a new way what most of us have always known to be true. Happy employees make happy customers. And when you can see within the same company, in the same integrated data set, you can really see that relationship between how the employee is experiencing the company culture, maybe around a specific sort of strategy or mission priority, and how the customers are experiencing the results of that strategy or mission in the form of a product and brand. You can really connect the dots in a way that it's kind of hard to do because those data sets are often very, very segmented. The people who run EX in most organizations, if they even call it that, aren't really talking to the folks who are running CX because it's very siloed in HR versus, nowadays a CX department, or at least living under marketing or product management. So, the silos you see in organizations have traditionally made that hard. Our platform makes it very easy to really explore the experiences of all of your constituents, your employees, your customers, your leadership team, and even your community stakeholders. And that's exactly what we're doing with some of our customers right now is they're doing 360 experience insights and experience improvement through our platform.
Yeah, I find that very interesting because I'm picturing a scenario where you're looking at a specific touch point. I'll first start from the customer's point of view. Maybe the customer is complaining that the service is rather slow. When they make a request, it takes long for somebody to get back to them or to execute. And at the same touch point, when you look at the internal customer, the employee serving that customer, they're saying that the machines you give us are slow, and that frustrates me, which affects the way I communicate with the client. And so that's emotional data that you otherwise wouldn't have if you're using the traditional methods. But it's showing you that at this particular touch point, at this point in time, the two parties were affected in this way, and This is the solution that you can put in place.
You nailed it, because that's true for almost all of our experiences, right? None of our experiences are one-sided. Our experiences are either informed by some other human somewhere in that experience, even if not in the exact moment, or of course, it could be very much a direct interaction with a staff person or an employee of the company and the organization. So when people are trying to create solutions and products and services for people, they're having an experience together, whether it's in the moment or sort of stretched out over time. And you can absolutely see the relationship between what's happening from an employee perspective and what's happening from a customer perspective. Again, I think many leaders have known that intuitively, but the world has gotten so much more complex. The marketplace has gotten so much more crowded, and the noise level is really, really high, both in the market and in the organization. So now you're trying to figure out ways like, how do I restore some of these really, really foundational truths, this kind of core wisdom, and do it in a way that now can scale inside and outside the organization. And that's definitely what we're doing with Seek.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I started this platform and specifically wanted to talk about customer experience is because I realized that it's the backbone of any business, and yet many leaders do not give it the priority that they ought to. So whenever I come across a guest like yourself who has a mission to help businesses improve on their customer experience by extracting data that's as detailed as this, I simply have to ask the question, basically requesting you to tell or share with business owners or those people at the higher up office in the C-suite who don't particularly either understand the value of customer experience or know how impactful it can be on their businesses. So from your perspective as somebody that's dealing with the actual data and seeing how this is impacting businesses, what words of advice would you give people in leadership positions in as far as taking their customer experience seriously and not just hiring an intern to respond to phone calls and social media messages, but going beyond that and taking it seriously?
No, I love that question. And I think, the answer to that question around how to take CX, customer experience, seriously is there's several aspects to it. One is recognizing, to your point, what it's not. It's more than customer service. It's more than marketing. It's more than content management. It's more than product. It's more than operations. Customer experience is all of the ways that your customers are interacting with your product and your brand, and what that interaction is resulting in for them. Is it leaving them feeling better about your product, brand, and company, or worse? And so when you zoom out and you take a really sort of big picture view of, hey, put yourself in their shoes. Every executive that says, I don't know if we need to do that, also knows what it's like when they have a bad experience. They also know what it's like when they have a good one. And so sometimes I challenge them personally. I say, don't you want others to have the kind of great experiences you've had? Because if you do, that's what this work entails. And if you don't want to do this work, you're kind of saying you don't care if they have the same kind of great experience you have. So sometimes that personal challenge can motivate a few of them. But the bigger message is really around, how do you find ways to grow? If you're early stage in your business and product, a lot of your learning is going to come from execution, getting your product into the market, getting into the hands of early adopters, and finding out what they do with it. You're literally collecting CX stories by the way you're launching your product. At least I hope you are. But once you reach a certain point of growth and size and stability, it becomes most businesses' chief concern to say, how do we optimize what we're doing? because optimization in their mind leads to margin. And so they're looking for ways to streamline, to make things really, really efficient, really predictable. So now you have a super, super predictable model, and you're trying to maybe introduce new products or compete in a differentiated way, or you want your brand to stand out. Well, guess what? Those are all customer experience interaction points. You're going to have to start to figure out, is our business and our operations supporting those things? You can't do that in your normal research tools. You can't do that with your normal data sets. You've got to be willing to say, the customer experience is what we prioritize. Now let's move back upstream and see, what do we need to do in the organization to deliver that? That's honestly, some leaders want that, but a lot aren't ready for that. And I think that's where you see differentiation. The leaders who get it, they're growing their businesses faster, their organizations are happier, their margins are growing. And the leaders who don't want it are either they've got a really, really high moat around them so they can afford to not do it yet, or they're comfortable living with lower margins because maybe they're in a very, very mature industry and they can't differentiate. But I think there's always a way to improve experience. And I think if you're in the business of delivering products and services to customers, I don't understand fundamentally why you'd want to do it and not do it in the best way you possibly could. So customer experience to me is about saying, how do we fulfill the brand promise? How do we deliver the best value to our shareholders? How do we give our organization a great place to work? Because all of these things are aligned in delivering the business outcomes that we seek.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And James, before I let you go, there's a question. It's not a question, it's just a thought that I have, seeing how fast AI is evolving. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I foresee a future whereby you have AI robots or technologies interacting with one another from the client side and on the service provider's side. For instance, if I use a specific service every day and maybe one day that service is unavailable, I'll probably have a tool on my phone that detects that the service is down, maybe reaches out to the service provider automatically. It could be a phone call, it could be an email. And maybe when I wake up that day to use the service, it just notifies me that this service is down. I've reached out to them. They're saying it will be available at this time. Or even give me alternatives. These are the other options you can switch to. And then on the reverse side, there is another AI interacting with that AI saying that, oh, we've received this complaint. This is the frequency of the client's usage. Yep. Maybe if we give them a discount. Do you see a future where that sort of thing happens, where the human beings are kind of taken out or have minimal interaction, especially for these mundane interactions where you're asking basic questions and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think from our perspective, we're betting on the fact that humans are going to continue to have a role in their own experiences. That seems fundamental to us. If we transition to a world where humans don't play a central role in their own experiences, all bets are off because then we have fully arrived in the Matrix and other maybe not so fiction type scenarios. But in all seriousness, what I think it means, when I see the rise of agentic AI and agents and other tools, especially ones that can interact with each other, I see them, as you point out, taking off highly predictable and highly repetitive tasks where the resolution of those tasks is both knowable and trainable and adaptable within a certain margin. And I get it. By definition, these tools will continue to learn and expand exponentially how well they can predict what a resolution might look like. But we're really focused much further upstream. What kind of experience does the customer want in the first place? To know or to train that agent on, this is how you know when the experience is not being met. So I can foresee a world where our insights are really the knowledge base for those agents to say, these customers really want these things based on their own stories and their own words. I mean, these aren't just 2 or 3 sentences of an open end. They're writing 300, 400, 500 words in their stories about their experiences. There's a lot of data in that. In each story, there's sometimes 500 emotional data points. So when you think about a future where we can process that data, predict against that data, and correlate that data in real time with all these variables shifting, the person, the context, the place, the product, I think that actually makes our platform even more useful in that future because we become the knowledge engine that helps those types of interactions become more useful to the customer.
Yeah. Well, James, that brings us to the end of the interview. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I know I said we'll talk for maybe 15, 20 minutes, but sometimes when the conversation is very engaging, we stretch beyond that. But I want to thank you once again for coming onto the show. And maybe before you go, can you let the viewers and listeners know where they can find your platform, how they can connect with you personally in case they have any questions?
Absolutely. Well, if you want to learn more about the platform, if you might be one of our potential customers, somebody who's looking to improve employee and customer experience in your company, go to seekplatform.com. That's SEEQ platform.com. And then if you want to try the platform for yourself, it's really simple. You go to the actual website, which is seek.sharemorestories.com/demo. That's seek.sharemorestories.com/demo. And that will allow you to actually see what it's like for a participant. Because I think once people realize, wait a minute, I'm really writing my own story, it opens up their mind into what their customers and their employees might be able to tell them that they're not asking them today.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the interview. Thank you once again, James. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to chatting with you once again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.